Welcome to the Business Conversation. My name is Michael AC Maynard. I'm here every week at 2:30 right here on Faith TV. If you're a new viewer, this show is specifically for Christians who are in business or who want to get into business. And for my regular viewers, welcome. So as always, throughout the show, we're going to be talking business. And I'm giving away 5 copies of my new book, How to Build a Christian Business. They're ebook copies, so what you need to do is email me throughout the show. My email address is on the screen. It's michael@michaelacmaynard.com. So the first 5 people that email me will get a free ebook copy. For those who want to purchase a hard book copy that they can actually read and take on the train or whichever, please email me also. And for the next month or so, I'm also giving away copies, or until stocks last, of my first book, which talks about my reason why and how to build and understand your purpose. So you're going to get buy one get one free if you like, and the cost is only £10 for the both. So please email me. Feel free to tweet me as well. It's just Mike AC Maynard. And as I said, this is it's designed to really speak to around business things. And I know that sounds a bit broad, but what we're trying to look at is what us as Christians, how do we get into business? And what makes us different from anyone in the business world, effectively, who's not a Christian? Is there a difference? And I hope through these shows that you'll be encouraged with what the content that I bring. So very practical. And today what I want to cover is 3 things, really. Last week I spoke a little bit around it's important to have a word that governs your business. And I spoke about the scripture Luke 19, starting from verse 13, and I'll go a little bit into that, but I want to add some more flavour to that this week if I can, and make it relevant, the scripture relevant to your business. I'm also, as always, going to talk about what's happening in the business world and see if there's anything that's relevant out there that we can attach and apply to our business. And then this week I want to touch on, I understand there are a lot of people who are thinking of doing a business or who are currently in business and probably missed this step out. But I want to talk a little bit around market research and not just the importance of doing it, but I guess a couple of tips on how you can do it. And I'm an avid researcher, so I've scoured the internet and books and all the rest of it. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of tips on the best ways to actually research your audience, your potential customers, and more about your business. So let's start this week with the word. And as I said last week, I spoke about Luke 19 verse 13, and it was around the ruler who went to receive a kingdom, and he gave money, roughly 3 months' salary, or the Bible at the time, the currency was minas, and he said, I want you to go and work it, do some business, and when I'll come back, I'll get the interest, or I'll get the increase of that, and I'll reward you accordingly. And obviously I'm paraphrasing, and the story goes on to tell us that when he came back, he rewarded some and he dismissed others. So I won't cover everything that I spoke about last week, but a couple of points which I did pull out, which I think are quite important, was, well, one is, although they were only given 3 months' salary, which, it was considered something small, there was still an expectation for them to work which they had been given. And one of the things I said very clearly is God has expected us to kind of work what he's given us, whether it's small or whether it's large. Another thing which I think is worth pulling out, and I didn't cover this last week, was the ruler wouldn't have given them the money and said, do business until I come, if he was not confident in their ability. Now, I think that's quite important, because there's many people that maybe God has spoken to you about doing a business, or you've always had it in your heart, but you're thinking, well, actually, I'm not equipped to do that. Now, sometimes you may have to go and get the skills. You may have to go and attend college or a night school or whichever. But sometimes the skills are there, and sometimes it's just for you to tweak those and then start. And sometimes we wait thinking, I need to be at this level before I start. But there are many people that have started businesses that didn't have everything that they needed, and they either bought the skills in or they went and got them. So there was an expectation on these guys that when the ruler said do business, he knew they had the skills and the knowledge to do that. So that's the first thing. I want you to be more confident in obviously what you're doing and your business and the skills that you have. So Another, I guess, probably more of a negative from this story was, if you read it through, it talks about one of them buried his money in the sand and said, well, he feared his master. And when I looked at this, I was thinking, well, how does this relate to us as businesses? And I thought, well, actually, many people are governed by fear, and they've not started their business because they're fearful, or they procrastinate, or as I said before, they think they haven't got the skills, or they're scared of what could happen, or scared of succeeding, or scared of failure. But fear is always going to be present, and if you look at and do research and study, many people, even the greatest daredevils in the world, say fear is present, but they use that and they overcome that fear by pushing through it and continuing. And so in this case, the servant buried it, and he feared the master. And many of us are doing that. We're burying our talents and we're burying our ideas. If that's you today needs to be the day where you say, well, actually, no, I'm going to get into business. I'm not going to fear anymore, but let's see what happens. In other words, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to try it. And I want to encourage you with that. One of the things that I think is also important to pull out, and this is not just in business, but in verse 23 of that same text, it talks about the ruler said to the lazy servant, if you like, well, you could have at least buried it, you could have at least invested it into the bank, and I would have got interest. And so even though the interest would have been minimal, there's still an expectation. And the point I want to get across today is there isn't an excuse not to do it. There's scriptures that talks about God takes no delight in those of us who draw back. In Hebrews it talks about that. So there is not an excuse. Fearful is not an excuse. Procrastination is not an excuse. If you are called to do business, if it's in your heart and you know it is, I'm telling you today, you need to start. You need to get up and you need to do it. I know it seems a little bit harsh, but that's one of the things that I really believe that God is speaking to us about in this day and age. There's no longer time to be tepid, but we are to move on and do what He's asked us to do. And I guess from that story, to end on a positive, for those people that are doing what God has called them to, and they are pushing and they are trying to work it, the Bible calls them faithful, and it says that God will reward them. In other words, the effort that you put in, He will reward you. The increase that you bring, He will reward that increase. So let's do business. Let's get our ideas out. Let's develop our ideas and actually start to bring that increase that will impact the kingdom. So that's Luke 19 verse 13, and as I said, I could probably go on a little bit more on that, but as I said, the main points I wanted to bring out today, and I hope that you've got something from that. So what's happening in the business world? And as I said earlier, I always try to bring something that's relevant. I try to do a bit of research, and I had a look actually on LinkedIn, and they do a survey annually, and they looked at some of the businesses that were declining. Now, I'll read some of the areas, and you can take this in both ways. You can look at it, maybe you're doing one of these businesses, or maybe you're looking to supply one of these businesses, and you can take evasive action or innovate. But when they did a survey of 2012, the businesses that were declining were restaurants, there were warehousing, capital markets, automotive, construction, newspapers, because we're all doing things online, or a lot more online, telecoms, and also pharmaceuticals. And then going towards the top were more internet-based businesses, online publishing, e-learning, international trade and development. And I'll stop there, but one of the things I want to point out is the first three that were on the increase were all to do with the internet, and they were all web-based. And so it's important that when you're looking at your business, you've got to think, if the majority of your customers are online customers or high users of the internet, how can you ensure that your product is either distributed via the net, in other words, you sell via the internet, or can you create it in such a way that it is electronic? So whether it's available in an app or a software or something of that nature. So That's where the trend is going. And we all know that because a lot of us buy off the internet. And 10 years ago, we wouldn't believe in it. We wouldn't have put our details in, especially our payment details. But now things are secure, and it's made the world, in regards to trade, a smaller place. So when you're looking at your product, make sure that it's relevant for not just for your market, but also in regards to where it's going in trends. And if you're one of the businesses that I read out that is in the lower end, then it's time for you to innovate. If you believe that this is a business that you are to remain in, you've got to innovate. You've got to think, how can I develop better, or how can I change, or how can I move forward, and so that you're not part of a declining business, but you're part of a business group or industry that is innovating. You're part of that change. So what else is happening in the business world that I can bring to you today? Well, one of the things that a lot of people ask me, and I do a lot of business consultancy, and one of the things that people ask me, they say, well, I need money for my business, how can I get funding? And it's always a bit of a grey area, because we've all read things in the press that it's harder to get business funding and banks are not loaning and all these type of things. But if you do a little bit of research, you'll find that there is still funding available, and the government is still committed, and it depends on your industry, to offer grant funding. And so, as I said in my research, I would encourage you to have a look on, it's actually a government website, www.gov.uk. Every business needs funding, and you've got to think of the best way to fund your business. It could be through a grant, but it also could be through friends, it could be through family, it could be through other ventures that you're doing, or even your wages. But remember, as with Luke 19, you start with a little, and you build for a little, and then you build on, and then you build on. But having the funds to do your business is extremely important, and you've got to consider that. The Bible tells us that we've got to count the cost. So from the very beginning, once you've done your plan, you've got to understand exactly what money that you need. A couple of weeks ago, I had a couple of guests that was on my show, and I don't know if you remember, for those of you that didn't view at that point, but they were talking about the majority thing you need is to keep the business going, and obviously to pay for your own living expenses and to continue living whilst you're building your business. And years ago, you could stop working and just do your business, and great, it worked. Where we are currently now, you cannot afford to do that. And so you've got to get that balance of working and obviously starting your business out of hours. So funding is a definite. Have a look on a grant, put together an investment plan, see if you can find a partner or someone else who can help you fund your business. So what I want to talk about now is a little bit about your market research and your ability to not just target the audience, but also find out a little bit more. And that's what the research is designed to do. If you're developing a product or a service, the aim is to research your market first, and the results of this inform your actions or inform your product development. So there are two real types of market research, and they're very simple terms, and they're basically primary and secondary research. And they're, if you like, I won't say an old-fashioned technique, but really there are, businesses have been doing this for years, and as the years have gone on, we've just found more complex ways to do it. But primary research is really just asking people. It's having a conversation. It's like me saying to you, what do you think of my show? Please email me and let me know. That's primary research, because you're giving me live feedback, and that feedback I can use to help develop next week's show. So primary research is really just asking people, and there are many different ways to do this. I'll just give you a few, so please jot these down. One of the probably most old-fashioned ways is a questionnaire. Businesses used to spend ages on developing these questionnaires, and then you'd maybe go to a shopping centre and see somebody sitting there kind of asking you questions, and they'll stop and say, can I ask you this? And often we walk by, but they're gathering and collecting data for something, and that's a basic form. So what you could do is aim for 10 to 12 questions, things that relate to your business, and then hand them out to friends, family, put them on Facebook, but you just want people to feed back, and they've got to be questions that are obviously relevant to your business. What you could also do is interviews. either telephone or face-to-face. So that's literally asking again, friends, family or user groups, and literally taking the time to sit with them and ask them the questions over the phone. A little bit more personal, and you can have a bit more of a relaxed conversation, but make sure you take notes, because any information that they say could be vital for your product. Surveys is another good one. We're seeing a lot of online surveys happening at the moment, and a lot of larger organisations are using online survey companies to actually ask us of our opinion. And so that's something that you could do. And there's SurveyMonkey is a classic example of one which is free. You can go on there and you can create a survey, and obviously it will go out to the masses, and you can send it to who you want to, for example, or tweet it or whichever. So online surveys is a definite one. And another one which is probably a bit more of a focus, and you hear by the name, is creating a focus group. And that's maybe finding people who maybe your customers or maybe from different target groups, and having a conversation. And that's saying to them, what do you think about this? So for example, if I had a focus group, I could take my computer and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about its colour? What do you think about its functionality? And you're just having a conversation, and whilst they're talking to each other, you're noting things down, and you're throwing in little bits and bobs because you want to kind of steer the conversation, but it's a focus group. And the importance about that is getting feedback and using that feedback. So that's primary research, and there are a couple of examples that you could use to actually help develop your product. The second is secondary research, and that's pretty much, we all use it these days, is the internet, and that, or using books and magazines. What you're doing, you're not conducting the research, but you're basically reviewing research that somebody else has already done. So when you go onto the internet and you search for something, you're researching, that's kind of what we call secondary research, because somebody has already done that research and you're just kind of reading up on it. And the thing about that is, although it's very popular these days, we've got to ensure that it is a good source first and foremost. You need to ensure that the source is the correct source. I mean, after all, you're going to develop your product on it or your business on it, but you've got to make sure that it's right. It's not enough these days to actually just rely on that. And as I said, because it doesn't always give a true flavour of your potential target market's opinion. One thing you've also got to look at that to help you understand that is the data that you're collecting. Any information is vital information, and make sure that when you start your research, you collect that data and you store it in an appropriate place, and you put it into a format that will best inform your business. You could use that later on in your business or in years to come to look back and think, well, have I varied much from this? Or do another data analysis and think, has things changed? Are there different trends? And so data is vital, and every business has to have data, and has to have and be able to analyze that data in a good way. So within research, and we get a little bit more technical, but there's quantitative methods and qualitative methods. And I'll give you a quick example of what they are. I mean, quantitative methods is basically just looking at stats, and it's more statistical. So if you were going to look at a target group, for example, you may go onto a statistics website, which is secondary information, and you may look at, I don't know, what's the population of London, for example. It's very much numerical. And based on that, you say, well, actually, if let's say there's 1 million, I know there's much more, but if there was 1 million people in that town, then you're saying to yourself, if I can hit 10% of that, which is 100,000, it would equate to this amount of sales. So that's kind of very statistical and what we call quantitative type of analysis, if you like. And the best thing to do is use a large sample. So, look at as much data as possible, and then obviously make it relevant for your business. Qualitative methods is a little bit about what we kind of talked earlier, and that's more talking to people and trying to gain more first-hand experience, and looking at problems that's happened before. and think, well, how can I learn from someone else's problems? Or looking at your competitor and thinking, how can I learn from there? And that's more sort of qualitative data. It's things that's happened that you can learn from. It's conversational, you know, and so you've got to use both types, quantitative and qualitative, in your research. A key also to looking at your research is looking at your competitors. You know, doing what we call a competitive analysis. You know, and that's basically looking at your competitors and thinking, well, what do they do? You know, what are they good at and what are they bad at? Who do they sell to? Yeah, I think these are areas that we miss out as businesses. We get a word and we run to do business, but we forget to do the groundwork. You know, and you're sitting at home right now or sitting in the office and you have an idea, and I'm now telling you, before you even start that, to do the groundwork, start to do some research and start to look at exactly what do the trend data say. And I know it's boring stuff, you know, these are the kind of things that we don't want to do in business, you know. We want the sales and we want the money to come in and we want to deal with our customers. But under any good organization is information, and it props it up. And so you need to ensure that you have the correct information. So let me just give you a few tips around the common mistakes I think that people do at the moment when they're doing research. And number one, as I said earlier, they use only secondary research. Not good. You've got to actually obviously look at primary research as well and choose the best way to do that. I also mentioned this earlier, sometimes people only use web resourcing. The internet is not the be-all and end-all. Yes, it's great, but you've got to take your search a little bit deeper than that. And there are companies that can actually help you do that as well. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is surveying people that they know. In other words, you ask your friends and family, and whilst that's great, we may not always get an accurate picture. And we've all got friends and families that don't always tell us the truth, you know, and they may all say that product's great, but in actual fact it's not. So you cannot just use friends and family. And that's one of the common mistakes that people make when they're actually doing research. So I'd encourage you, obviously, not to spread your net a little bit wider than that. So that's, I guess, market research in a whistle-stop tour. And your action from today really is to go away with your business idea and research and start to think, what is it that the world is saying? What data supports what I'm trying to do? You know, it's almost justification. You've got this great idea. You know, you've got this potential worldwide business. Now you want the information that justifies that. You know, and as a Christian, ask and God will direct you to the most appropriate source of information. But you just want to justify why you're doing what you're doing. And if you're somebody who's going to go to grants or a bank or even friends and family for funding, they're going to say, how do you know what works, what you're doing works? So I think that's important that you now go and get the justification for your business. So I hope all of that's been very useful for you. And as I said, we've covered a few areas today. We've looked at market research. We've looked at a little bit about what the Word is saying and God's kind of commission to us, if you like, is to do business until He comes. And we've also looked at what's in the world at the moment, and we've given examples of how we can get funding and also looking at the declining and increasing businesses. And I really just want to end on I guess introducing the book again, because much of what I'm speaking about is captured in the book. And as I said, it's called How to Build a Christian Business, and a great resource. It only is 12 chapters in total, but I'll give you a little bit of a flavour if I can, so hopefully that the book will intrigue you to purchase it. And if you're one of the people that managed to email me throughout the show, then you've got a free ebook copy which basically allows you to download. But how I start the book, and again, as I said, I always try to make scriptures relevant to us in business. And what I've done, I've started it by looking at Christ's business. You know, and a lot of people go, oh, you know, Christ didn't have a business, but the principles are the same. He ran a ministry, you know, and we look at it and we think, well, actually, he only had, it was him and the 12 disciples, but there wasn't. the Bible says that he had many followers, and there were also people that were helping to support him and fund his ministry. So I've looked a little bit around Christ's business, and I've looked at what did he do before he started, and we can draw some principles on that. I've looked at the time that he spent in prayer and the importance of how we should do, how he fasted and prayed, and these are things that we should do for our business. And then I moved on into him starting and how he used Galilee as his base and how he recruited, if you like. And if you look at the 12 disciples, they were effectively his employees, and he recruited them, and he looked for certain, skills, if you like, based on where his business or where his ministry was going. For example, a very quick one was Peter. We know that his name was Simon, but he called him Peter and said that he was a rock, and he told him upon him he'll build his church. So that's like us looking at the future and thinking, right, I'm going to employ somebody that will help build my business. So we can draw some key parallels from what Christ did to us into our business. And we can also look at, and I've heard so many ministers say this, out of the 12 there was one bad apple or whichever. But we can look at Judas as an example of how we can manage difficult stuff. So, as I said, please get the book. Email me on michael@michaelacmaynard.com. And I just want to leave you with saying, do business till he comes. Please tune in next week at 2:30. Thank you.